Yeah, influences. So I just wrapped up a video talking about, what makes me tick, how we got to where we're at now. And there's so much that I could share over the years, and I think just sharing it in content form helps me get my story dialed in. I I get it. After a certain point, I I decided that I would take it seriously enough. So I want to share with you some of my influences, like back in the '90s. So I'm older, man. Like I grew up in the '90s. I graduated high school in 1993. I fucking went to go. I grew up in Central California, so I grew up in this little town called Delhi, and then once I got high school age, we moved to this town called Turlock, which was next to it. Turlock, if you're a rock and roller, you probably know either Granddaddy or it's next to Modesto. So the meatshits, right? And the meatshits was my first fucking punk show ever. I went to go see the meatshits with Plaid Retina and Sharon Tate, and I remember, I think this, they didn't have the internet back in the day, but I think this was kind of a trend where we were in the bingo hall in fucking Turlock, and I remember this show, like these Sharon Tate or someone was playing. Might have been the meat shits. It's all a blur now, but like they started boarding up the doors, and they're like, the cops are here. And I don't know if the cops were actually there, but it was like a big deal. Like they were shutting down shows. I think some of it was they would make an ordeal out of it at some shows, and I could be wrong about this because this was my only experience, but I've kind of heard things. So I might be wrong. An elder could shut me down on this, but it seems like it was kind of a thing some bands would do to like heighten the experience, as it were. Yeah, but it. So I remember that, and that kind of like I realized that there was a war going on. It's been going on. It's an ongoing war, And I think that was the moment where I was like, yeah, I want in. And from that point on, it was like, okay, what do I want to do? What do I want to do? Do I want to just be punk rock? I remember jamming with this guy, Dave Birch, who was Aaron Birch of Granddaddy's little brother, and he wanted to be a drummer too. And we might have been like 18 or 19. And I'm like, dude, I want to start a band. And Aaron, high on the success of what his brother was going through, was like, what do you really want to do though? And so I had to put some thought into it. It was like the '90s. So much stuff was going on. Everyone was stoked on grunge. I think Kurt Cobain had just died. So things were changing rapidly in that scene. Band, I learned about bands like Pavement, who were from Stockton, and they were kind of like antagonistic, the future of punk. You know what I mean? In the eyes of Dave Birch, anyways. And I think a lot of tastemakers back then too. I didn't really read the magazines or anything. I just knew it was cool. I heard it. I was like, this is what I like. And there was just so much, And I think, moving on from that, like I really gravitated towards, I really like Sonic Youth, but I like the noisy shit. I really like the album Sister. And it's so subversively pop. It's like, fuck you, pop. I hate your eardrums, pop, and I fucking loved it. I loved it. Yeah, and I appreciate a lot of their other albums too, but I really got into that stuff. So like, when I moved to Santa Clara, that's a whole nother story, but I lived near the university. One night I walked out and I went to, I was just walking towards the university. I wasn't going there or anything. I was just kind of dicking around, seeing what I could find. And I ran into a group of people loading out of a van, and it turned out to be Blonde Redhead. And their gig fell through, and they were on tour. And so, like, someone from the university was like, well, I happen to have a radio show, and invited them back. And so I just started talking to people and just kind of got in there, and they're like, come on down. It was like me and one other person, and then the staff, the DJ, you know. And I watched Blonde Redhead set up, and what looked like two brothers and a Japanese lady. You know, I was like, this is cool. This is diverse, you know. I could tell that the brothers were like not from here, you know. There's something going, like, you know, they might have, yeah, I wasn't sure what they were, you know, they might have been French or Italian or something. But I really just got lost in that music. There wasn't a bass player. It was just, I remember vividly just seeing the guitars lined up behind them up against the records. And it was magical. It was a magical experience, dude. It really, like, transformed my, you know, my thought on where I wanted to go with music. Because it felt like, you know, they're very similar to Sonic Youth, but I always felt like there was just something uniquely them, you know. And so that just, after that really solidified that, like, I started messing around with alternative tunings and all that. The other thing was I would go down to the Cactus Club, and anytime the Melvins would play, I would go there, and they were playing a lot. And so, you know, I got to see the Melvins with Helmet. I got to see the Melvins do a 3 Melvin set. I skipped the one with Tool because, like, I was just not, I don't know, man. I liked Tool when I first, the EP and stuff like that, but I think as nu metal happened, in my mind, I just associated them with that, so I just didn't even want to deal with it. No offense to those guys, they're great musicians and all, but that's just how it was, you know. But yeah, I'd go see Neurosis, and I remember seeing Neurosis with Gore in Los Gatos in, like, the early mid 90s, and through Silver and Blood. Yeah, Neurosis through Silver and Blood. And so I remember just people walking out in droves at that show, just not into it. And, like, this is the first time I've really been exposed to anything that was remotely close to industrial, really, other than Ministry or Butthole Surfers or, like, Skinny Puppy or something. But, like, live, I've never seen anything like that. And I was like, wait, these guys are more than just an industrial band. It's like heavy, it's all this shit. I was like, okay, this is all the things I like. You know, it was scary. The visuals were scary and creepy, and, like, yeah, it was awesome. It was fucking awesome. And I just remember people leaving, just not being not into it, you know. Purely there for Gore or something, you know. But, you know, and Gore was great too. Like, that was an amazing experience. Like, Jerry Garcia had just died, so they had, like, a giant Jerry Garcia person that they would eviscerate. And, like, yeah, it was great. Great experience. Had a lot of fun. And yeah, so those are the things in my early 20s that, like, really, you know, going to the Gilman a lot and seeing, like, as I got a little bit older, Dystopia and Newsgrush and stuff. So I knew I wanted to, like, you know, Spaz. I'd go see Spaz, Capitalist Casualties, Noisegate. I was really into Noisegate, and I was into noisy stuff, like, you know. So in between all this, I think I wanted to say that I got into the Spaceman 3 and Spectrum and all that stuff, and it was all, like, I never got to see any of those bands, obviously, but it was something I listened to a lot. And then as I got older, I went to Seattle before I moved to Anchorage, like a couple of summers before that. And so I was in Seattle for a summer, and I ended up at a party. And I just kind of getting to know people. And I noticed that cocaine was a thing and heroin was a thing. And so I'd have to just not. I had a hard time navigating that because I was still in my early 20s. So that was a social thing, you know what I mean, listening to Spaceman 3 and Spiritualize, and I still didn't really understand what shoegaze was, you know what I mean, like, my experience with Blonde Redhead and, like, listening to Spaceman 3, I didn't care that it was shoegaze, I just fucking liked it, you know, or, you know, pop, you know, dream pop. But yeah, you know, I like the Velvet Underground and all this stuff. So I was at this party, so it just made sense that I would be really into My Bloody Valentine. And this guy at this party was like, I didn't realize it was a joke. But it was like the whole house was just sick of this dude playing this fucking record over and fucking over again. And I got the picture really fucking quick, but this guy was like, no, I gotta put on this record, and the rest of like, don't put on the fucking record. I'm like, okay. And so I think it was like a joke and to see how many times they could play that record at the party. But anyway, I was like, no, play the record. I must hear this. And the guy put on the record, and it was Bliss. And it was My Bloody Valentine Loveless. And so, you know, it seemed like everyone knew except for me. And I'm okay with that, because I'm kind of a hick. I went with it, you know. I'm like, all right, cool, let's fucking go. And yeah, anyway, so I went and quickly got the tape cassette of Loveless, which was on the Bargain fucking, you know, back then. Iggy and the Stooges' Raw Power, and I walked out the fucking door, you know what I mean? Like, the rest is history. I got really obsessed with My Bloody Valentine and Spaceman 3, you know, and so I was late to the party on the shoegaze thing, but I was like, this is still fucking cool, you know, bands like Slow Dive, obviously, so I just kind of like cascaded from there. And I was really into this project called Ear, this album called Beyond the Pale. I remember picking up a CD of that, and it was on Big Cat Records or something. It was like this indie label, and I was like, that's cool. You know, that was kind of a thing back in the day. If it had like an indie label, or if it was mail order or something like that, like it felt more special. You know what I mean? It felt like a secret that you can share with your close friends, you know? And that's what I remember being cool about music, and that's kind of the band I wanted to be. Anyway, man, don't forget to dream. Yeah, it's a weapon.